Morning, folks. I guess it's the first day of spring, but it sure feels like, it looks like fall. It's blustery out there. It's cold. It's windy. Feels like it's going to rain. It's at least 10 degrees below normal and a lot wetter than usual. Must be 4 or 5 times the precipitation, the normal precipitation. Okay. It's just another sign of the earth changes. Man, those SUVs are getting more efficient in the global warming, aren't they? Oh, hogwash. My little girl is really demanding this morning. She wants a lot of attention. It is 1:37 in the morning. I got up a little after midnight, which is ridiculous. But I had a dream in which my former supervisor shows up and did something, and I was involved in some sort of an amazing project with him. He was extremely brilliant, and whatever it was, I don't remember. It was a pretty intense dream, though, but it was so real. And of course, it wasn't reality at all, but it just was so intense. And here I am. I'm waking up with the urge to explain to you, or try to explain, that which I don't understand, that which I can't understand. And it's like, well, how am I going to explain it? Well, I'm just going to have to describe it and try to, and hope that the limitations that I have, and maybe through this exercise, you'll figure it out. I mean, this might be one of those things that it's not necessary for me to figure out. It's necessary for me to get somebody out there, some young, brainy, very intelligent person to figure this out. Because I'm willing to bet you that somebody watching this video somewhere is going to sort this out very instantly. I don't get many comments. Boy, I would love to hear from the person who understands what I don't understand. The early days of our nation, we were confounded. We were undermined from the get-go, and we really didn't have much of a chance. We were undermined in the early days, and I thought, well, this is the act, this is the time, this is the point in history in which we lost our republic, or we lost our way. This is where they captured us. This is how they did it. And it turns out they captured our symbols. It was like a game of capture the flag. You know, you have two groups, and each group has a flag, and the idea is to go get the other guy's flag and then replace it with your flag. I think we did that when we were kids. It's been a while. I swear, I must have been in third grade or fourth grade. It's been a while. It turns out that it might actually literally be true. It looks like our flag had to be patented or copyrighted somehow. And it looks like the purpose of the copyright was so that we could open up for business and conduct commerce. So the motivation was, we're a young nation, and we need to be able to trade with the rest of the world. We don't have any industry. Great Britain has the industry. Back then, knitting was considered manufacturing. As a matter of fact, I think in the guild, you had to be a man to be able to manufacture, to be a knitter. And I think one of the big deals about Betsy Ross knitting the flag was that she wasn't a man. It was a woman doing the manufacturing. Ladies out there might want to look into this. I had a dream, a vision years and years ago, and I shared it with my dear friend because she was in it too. And in that vision, we were knitting. And we were each sitting on top of some rock structures in the desert Southwest. I had never been to the desert southwest at the time, and I considered a premonition that I was going to be going down that way. And in my premonition dream, we each sat atop a rock structure. And in the desert, flat on the top, and it was narrow, and we had a knitting contest. And the faster you knitted, the higher up your rock went. And so she and I were having a knitting contest, sitting cross-legged at the top of our own little piece of land that would go up and drop down, all according to the rate at which we were knitting our flags, I guess. Whatever it was, there were times in which she was beating me. She'd go way up there and then come back down a little bit, and I'd catch up to her and pass up to her. And then it was like a contest. I think there were other people involved in this too in the distance, but she was the only recognizable person in this whole dream sequence. It's been a long time since I had that. So when our flag was put together by Betsy Ross, I remember being told it was an act of rebellion because she violated the laws and rules of the guild in England. She was manufacturing against the laws. Not only that, she was a woman and she was manufacturing. My God, heaven forbid a woman should be allowed to compete in industry. Anyway, my dear friend was really fast at typing. I mean, she was really good at it. I don't understand how people get those fine neuronal connections so that they can go so fast, think that quickly, and their fingers are just right there for them, doing automatically what they're thinking of at speed. Oh, wow. Anyway, that was Andrea. That was a long time ago. I believe when they patented our flag, they opened up the post office. And they had to do that in order to do commerce. But I think that we did it under the King of England. I believe he was in charge of commerce. Somehow, technically, the King of England was the gateway. And we could not do commerce as a young nation. We could not open ourselves up to do trade unless we had the shelter for it, a union, if you will. You know, we have a union of states, but we also have a union of men and women. We have members who pay dues into the union, belong to the union, get the benefits of the union, are represented by the union, do bargaining as the union, get laws put into place so we can limit our competition, open up our competition. So apparently what they did is they patented our flag. And when they patented the flag, someone held the copyrights. So it has to do with copyrights. And I believe the copyrights were held in Rome. I believe there are clearinghouses for copyrights. And every time you exercise a benefit and there's a transaction on a copyright, there probably are a few cents of tax in the background at the least that add up over time, add up in big ways. I suspect that's what's happened. So somebody out there is going to be brainy, going to understand this and put it together. So whoever it is that owns the copyrights, whoever it is that registers them and controls them, has been taxing us in the background for a long time. And the other thing that we needed was we had to have a post office. We had to have a way to connect with the rest of the world. And I thought that perhaps the post office was still in existence. It turns out what we have is the United States Postal Service. It's different than the post office. And supposedly the post office is still open, still in effect, and I guess it has only one employee, the postmaster general. My understanding is that there's been a constant fee for mailing a letter, and that there's a specific box in your post office in which, if you know how to address the letter, you can put a 3-cent stamp on it and still get it mailed anywhere. I don't know how you do that. Sounds kind of fraudulent to me. Doesn't sound quite on the up and up. But apparently, there's a bunch of little traps, tricks of the trade, bunch of fraud going on. So, I don't want to be committing fraud. I don't want to be partaking in a fraud. But that's the problem we have, is from the get-go, the foundations were off. Now, who was it that set that up? Our founding fathers. Who was it that was noted in particular for setting up the post office and all that stuff? Benjamin Franklin. I believe he was our first postmaster general. If Ben Franklin was alive today, I'm sure he probably would be able to give us an accounting for himself and explain it to us. But we know that Ben Franklin had a reputation of peccadillos. We know he was a ladies' man, and he had quite a reputation. We know that he represented us and signed treaties upon our behalf. We know that the gentleman with whom he signed the treaty, who was supposed to be representing the King of England at the time, also represented the Pope, Rome. So he wore 2 hats. And we know he did business as both. So we got screwed up from the beginning. And the word was that Ben Franklin was honeypotted, if you will, or entertained, seduced, that he made a deal, or they got him to sign on the dotted line by entreating him to the ladies of the Hellfire Club. I don't know. There's got to be some young budding historians out there that can answer this. And then I understand recently that the copyrights on our flag were going to lapse. And a gentleman stepped in and seized the copyright. He won the game of capture the flag. And as a result, we weren't taken over or taken back by the King of England again. And one of the signs of that was, at the time, there was the American Amero in the background. They were going to unite the entire Western Hemisphere, I guess we'll call this. They were going to unite North America and South America under one currency called the Amero. Who was going to do that? The bankers, undoubtedly. The Rothschilds were going to do that. So they were going to enslave us again. And they still work on enslaving us. They're doing that through their digital currencies primarily, in which we think we're going to have more freedom and privacy, but they're nothing but traps. I made a mistake and invested money in there, and I lost. I wish I hadn't done it at all. There's nothing there. It looks like it was set up. Nobody knows who invented it. Some Japanese gentleman. CIA. Okay, who knows who did it? But they're trying to capture us all at this point under their currency and money system and enslave us further. We're pretty enslaved as it is. We aren't very free. I still think the founders gave us the path, gave us the form for freedom. We just haven't exercised it yet. I don't think the United States of America has ever been free from the British Crown. I think the Queen ruled over us most of the time. I think one of the most treasonous, traitorous families in the United States of America, we call them the Bushes. That fellow out of Florida, he had the contract for security on the Trade Center and painting the frame. It had to be maintained by painting, and I guess he had some special stuff put into the paint, or some special paint was handed him that he had to paint this frame up with. And I think that had the explosive in the paint. And that's how they demolished those towers so fast. Such a controlled fashion. Man, what a show. They even had us thinking, still talking about planes taking the towers out. Wow. Talk about frauds. And I understand there was a bunch of gold stored in the basements. And it took trucks. It took trucks a lot of time to haul the gold out of the basement and steal the gold. Maybe it was all set up for the heist to cover up the theft of the gold. I don't know. Maybe the goal was to enslave the nation, to capture our hearts, our minds, and our soul, so that we would be easily misled, led by the nose again, by the evil, corrupt, warmongering bankers into another war, another brother war. Okay, maybe we're not that closely related to the Muslims, or you have to go back a long ways. I know that the Muslims are misguided when they claim that Isaac was their father. Isaac wasn't their father. Abraham was their father. So it was Isaac's father who was our father, their father, and our father. How do I know that? I know that from reading the Bible. There were 12 boys, 12 sons of Israel, through the 4 wives that Israel had. He got 2 wives, got screwed over by Laban, ended up marrying the oldest one, and he made a deal for the youngest one. So he ended up having to marry both wives, and he spent like 20 years there in service to him. And I think he spent 7 years for each one of his wives, but he spent a total of 2 decades over there before he went back home. 12 boys. He comes back. I think the last one was born in the promised land, and I think his wife, his favorite wife, passed, giving birth to the child. That would have been Rebecca, the older daughter, Leah. They each had their handmaidens, and they each gave their handmaidens to their husband so they could have more children through them. They were in a contest, like my knitting contest, only theirs was who could provide the most children. Then my husband will love me. Who could provide the most sons? See, that was considered being productive, having a productive life back then. And if we read carefully, we read that there was another fellow named Ishmael who was mothered by a handmaid, the slave woman, who Sarah gave her husband in order to have children through her. And then to Sarah's amazement, she had her own child. And she didn't want her child and the other child competing for the inheritance. And she ordered, convinced her husband, Abram, to send off the Hagar and her son Ishmael. If we read carefully, we find out that Ishmael had 12 boys as well. Interesting how that works. Parallel construction in the Bible. Interesting how the conversation is going to. So, we are related to them. way back then. And yet here we are being pitted against them by the evil ones in a great war planned during our Civil War, planned by a very evil man who spent a lot of time in Mississippi. He was a general, and his most important duties in the Army were to manage the Indians there and come up with treaties for them in the state of Mississippi. He planned World War I, World War II, and World War III. He outlined all of that. He planned the path of evil. He planned this way back in the 1850s. Wow. He came up with secret society traditions and rites of passage and levels. And he passed it all on to his counterpart in Italy, who continued on with the plans, the evil plans of this fellow. I can picture him, but I can't come up with his name right now. It'll come to me in just a minute or two, I'm sure. But this fellow planned World War III, and they actually wrote in their Bible the plans. They announced it in one of the headings in their publication in 1965. You see, it is a big, massive conspiracy. Can you get your head around it? I don't think so. I can't do it. Should we major in evil? Should we study evil that much? Well, it's very seductive. So if you're going to study it, you risk actually going with it. You risk getting tainted yourself. How do we get our independence back? Well, there was a gentleman that actually filed and got our flag back for us. And he's done that very quietly. Talk about a private victory. The rest of the country didn't even know about it, still doesn't know about it. I don't know what to make about it. He actually showed how all of the contracts were frauds. That our contract law in this country has been done deceptively. I still think our founding fathers gave us the proper structure. I still think that we can, and I think it is our fate, is to actually reclaim that. And how do you do that? Whoa. How do you do that? Well, I don't think you have a bloody French Revolution. And as a matter of fact, our revolution, the American Revolution, wasn't a bloody rebellion. A riotous rebellion like the French had. No, it wasn't. It was actually, we ignored the British and built our own governments. We formed our own governments. I think that's the key today as well. I think that we actually ignore the monstrosities they've created, the incorporated governments that they've given us, which appear to be all evil. I mean, the municipality of Anchorage opened up one of their assembly meetings with a prayer to Satan. It's on the record. It really happened. It's hard to believe we did that. So why are we expecting good things? Why are we expecting good blessings to come from us if we're worshiping one of the fallen angels? We ignored those governments, the administration that the British gave us, and started our own. I think the British still run us. This Congress that we have, it's horrible. Nobody likes this Congress. Rather than go against them toe-to-toe or try to take them on or to even try to coexist, to even try to work within the system, I think we have to find our own system, a new system. I don't think it's very hard. I think we just go for the system we were originally given, the original structure. And in that, your Congress was not paid. Well, they were given a simple per diem while in service to help defray the costs of meals and lodging. That was it. No pay, no benefits. And your senators weren't elected by the people. They were elected from the states, from the state governments. So I think you recall the current senators, or you ignore them and you put together your own senators and send them to the Capitol. Now, there was a fellow a long time ago who was quite famous as a seer in America. And the characteristics he had was that he would go into trances and he would give people readings. And he covered some things that were pretty amazing. And he talked about the future capital of the United States of America. Where was that at? He said the future capital of the United States of America was going to be in Phoenix, Arizona. If you believe that, I've got some I have a bridge for sale to you. London Bridge, as a matter of fact. It's in Arizona. Yeah, it's really there. I got to go see it someday. He also said that Phoenix was a deep sea port. What's it going to take to make it a deep sea port? Are we going to dredge it out? No, we're going to have some earth changes most likely. And what did this gentleman have going for us that most of us don't have going for us? He perpetually read the Bible. Every year he read through the Bible. So in 1 year he read the whole Bible. That's what his practice was. That's what he had going for him. Edgar Casey. I can't read the Bible in a year. It takes me about 18 months. I'm retarded. I'm a slow reader, but let that be our secret. I have not read the Bible for very long or that many times. I've read it through approximately 13, 14 times. I guess I've been speeding up a little bit because I didn't start reading the Bible until after I had a couple of strokes in 2006. So just to be on the safe side, let's say that I started reading the Bible either 2007 or 2008. And here we are in 2023, 16 years. I have discovered the latest and greatest Bible. It's been produced during that period of time. It didn't exist when I first started reading the Bible. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, the King James Bible is the only Bible. Well, the proper name version of the King James Bible is a vast improvement on the original King James Bible. It has the proper name of Yahweh and Yahshua in it. It is more accurately translated. It's more readily understood. You will find that you make fewer assumptions, wrong assumptions, when you read it. You'll be less prone to what I call religiosity. That is, making up things that it doesn't say, or coming up with traditions opposite of what the Bible actually says. You will think better, you will think clearer. And I think you can reclaim your nation. You can get the republic back. Why is that? Because if you read the Bible, I don't think you can help but become good. Oh, sure, you can choose the other side. I think the bad guys use the Bible too. I think they read it, see all those consequences, and decide they're going to play God, and they're going to invoke and carry out those sentences upon us, if you will. I think it even gets down to the point where it's like, during the siege, you will eat your own children. That's what happened in Jerusalem. And of course, I think they're busy taking the aborted fetuses, the children, and putting those into the food supply and feeding those to us. into your cosmetics. Who knows where those bodies and parts of bodies end up? I'm sure it can be tracked and traced. They're not going to like you doing that because you're going to be interfering in commerce. You're going to be interfering in their business. What was that one woman from Planned Parenthood talking about? She was going to make enough money so she could buy a Ferrari. Ferraris at the time she was talking were about $275,000. They're probably more like $500,000 or $400,000 anyway today. They're more expensive than ever before. We say more expensive, but that's really not the proper perspective. The money is worthless. They're making it more and more worthless as time goes on, as they print more or as they create more out of computer spaces, out of nothing. They water down the value of other existing dollars. What a system of enslavement. What a system of slavery. It came out of Babylon, the money magic people. And by the way, these people seem to come out of one particular suburb in Babylon. And they rule the world today. They have interlocking networks of secret societies, and they've got the rest of us bamboozled, confused, confounded. They hide their nature from us. They hide who they are. In this nation, we have a lot of treasonous, traitorous rat bastards. Different levels of them, too. Can we ferret them out? Yes, I think we can. They don't tell the rest of us the truth. They mislead the rest of us. They act upon the behalf of the Crown of England. And there's a couple of crowns in England. You have the Crown Corporation, it appears to me. The incorporated one of a bunch of attorneys out of the city of London. And then you also have the Crown, which there was a queen for most of my life sitting on that throne. And now we have this son of a bitch who says, I'm not going to be sworn in on the Bible. And he's supposed to be coronated on the same pillow stone that Jacob put his head to rest on when he had his dream. Yeah, that's the stone that's in the throne, the seat of coronation that's in Scotland at this time. And they're going to get that ready because they have to go through the whole pomp and circumstance, the whole play, the whole public this spectacle. They've got to put that on for the whole world. So we will all be watching while that king, who really isn't even in the line to become king, gets crowned. His mother wasn't in the line either. The real king of England, if you follow the laws of hereditary, the real king of England is in Australia today. He's an elderly gentleman. He's a sheep rancher. I think England would be better served if the people rose up and demanded that he serve as their king. Seemed like a very nice fellow. I don't know how corruptible he is. I don't know how magnanimous he might be. I just know it sure would be nice to have a new set of eyes. It would be nice if the proper man was on the throne. Somebody who was actually in the line of King David. Yeah, that's right. The Queen of England claimed she was in that line of David, which she wasn't, and that she was just holding the throne, keeping it warm, the seat warm, so to speak, until the arrival of the real king, the arrival of Yeshua the Messiah. Wow. Makes you wonder about the entire religion, where we sold a false bill of goods. There are people out there who claim that they know who actually wrote the Bible, and it wasn't who we think. Yet the Bible still has integrity. It still holds together. It still informs us greatly. It still tells us what we're going through. This stuff was written down a long time ago. The prophet Ezra, I think he existed during the diaspora, during the captivity in Babylon. That would have been somewhere around 675 BC, 650 BC. And he wrote incredibly well. He describes the beast system that we have today. It's in 2 Esdras chapter 11. It's a three-headed eagle. The symbolism is very rich. I suggest you read that. Before you read that, though, read the book of Daniel where he describes the beast system. And you will see the continuity from way back then to today. How could men who were alive shortly after the death of Yahshua have written that and known that? We're talking a couple thousand years ago. How could they have known what we were going to be dealing with today and encoded it in those symbols? I don't think they could have. I think it was the Holy Spirit. I think it was Yahweh, or his Son, his physical presence on the earth, Yahshua. We worry about the money today, and there is no money. That's how they captured this nation. In 1913, they gave you 3 different institutions. And it culminated on Christmas Eve of 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve System, which is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. It's a system of black magic, money magic out of Babylon. It's owned by foreign families. Yeah, they got control of us. They took control over us. And within a few short years, they were able to wage World War I, the first of a series of brother wars in which they got us to fight against their own people. Half of the United States of America was from Germany, and they got us to go to war against our own people there in Germany. I'd like to say it never should have happened, but yet this was all planned. This is all foretold. It was all done in secret. It was all set up. It's not good. We have to somehow get control of it, get it back. I'd like to see us go after that family of traitors, the Bushes. How many millions of people are they responsible for murdering across the planet? The Gulf War was an illegal war. The war in the Ukraine is an illegal war. The war in Vietnam was an illegal war. None of those were justified. We were manipulated into each one of those. And they're trying to get us to go to war in the Ukraine so that they have an excuse to nuke us. And they'll say, oh, nobody in their right mind would ever want that. Nobody in their right mind would ever do that. Why would they do that? You need to stop asking such questions and just observe and realize they are going to do it. If they can get away with it, they're going to launch those missiles. Why? That's just the way they are. There is evil upon this earth. And for many years of my life, I was convinced the devil didn't exist at all. They sure as hell exist. They are here. They own and rule the place today. And of course, a man who's been had, the hardest thing is to convince him that he's been taken advantage of. Me, I'm able to see things a little bit more clearly, so I sense it quite well. Don't you sense it? Can't you feel that you've been deceived, that the entire nation has been led astray? I think that's the humbling of America. I was humbled in my own life. 2 strokes in 2006. I couldn't defend myself, my license to practice. I could not defend the position that I had. I was taken from the heights and brought down low. Okay. So what did I do? Well, I panicked. I realized I'd read everything on my library except for one book. You know what book that was. So I got that book out. I sat on my butt and I read it. And I read it. And I read it, and then I realized I needed to read it again. And it was at that point that my short-term working memory started to get working again. And the jackasses on the board of psychologist examiners, especially the one liberal asshole, he made a statement. I would hope he wouldn't commit disability fraud, something to that effect. You know, I'd like to have reached out and strangled that son of a bitch. I have to be honest with you. I wasn't fully aware of what I had been through at that point in time in history. Or maybe I was. It's hard for me to remember the exact sequence of things. The disorientation was that massive. But I know that I was recovering. I know that I was nowhere near as strong as I was previously. I also knew I wasn't going to be that strong. I wasn't going to be able to defend my license before these liberal assholes, these libtards. I know you're going to say, well, how rude of him. He needs to be able to speak more properly than that. Well, they're assholes, all right, and that's what they are. They have taken over the whole country. They have preached coexistence. At the same time, they've been discriminating against us every chance they get. It's been going on for decades. Don't think it's a recent event just because you're finally suffering from it like the rest of us have. They've been doing that to us for a long time. They are the devils that walk freely among us. And they think they're going to dictate through the laws everything, and they think that we can treat everything. And because we're treating it, that everything's okay. It's like saying we can treat a sex offender and he's going to be all right. It's going to come out good. No. And we botched that too, by the way. We had a decent sex offender treatment program, but we botched that. And we just used it to justify the unjust, to keep a man beyond the sentence date. And we failed to provide treatment early enough that he could have actually made something of himself. So we keep them past the dates of incarceration for the purposes of necessary treatment, which we don't have and which we can't do. But we have egos that are big enough that we can control it all. We can dictate it all. We'll dictate them right back to hell. A lot of those guys don't like what they've done, don't like what they've become. A lot of them can't be treated. And those that can be treated are relegated to the back burner to sit and stew with their crap. Could they be treated? Yeah, some of them, maybe. But most of them, no. I don't think so. We don't have proper science. We don't have the freedom to be able to come up with the treatments and do it. Such things are against the law. What we have is we had a couple bitches in there interviewing these gentlemen, getting them to fantasize, urging them on so that they could chart stuff up into this record, this record that was a fantasy of the women, of the professionals, and thereby they justified the need for treatment. Who was the sick son of a bitch? Who needed treatment? The women. One was married, and the other one wasn't. They had master's degrees, and they had the ability to write into the record and to make stuff up, and to fabricate and create a false record. I hate that. What good are they? They're no good at all. We'll talk about that more in depth sometime, but not today. Folks, you can't coexist with these devils. You can't coexist with these people that refuse to abide by the Ten Commandments. You just can't. They'll beat you. They'll beat you every time. They'll run your ass into the grave. They will rob you of all of your resources with their undue processes. That's the liberal way. Okay, so we can't go after you. We can't, harm you this way or that way. But we can require you to go to court and pay ungodly attorney's fees and waste all of your substance. That's what I was facing when I decided, hell, I might as well get out. They're never going to give me the ability to practice again, to support myself again. They're never going to give me a license unimpeded. And besides that, they are incompetent as hell. I don't even think I could explain the processes whereby I help people and that they would understand it. No, they're too busy building dependency on all of us here. You see, my field was used to take this nation down. My discipline, psychology, was used to undermine this nation and is hard at work behind the scenes. They are doing experiments and running game psyops on you at all kinds of levels all the time. I don't know who's crazier, the people for going along with it or the liberal psychologists who are doing the greatest harm to this country that's ever been done. They will preach coexistence. They will demand tolerance. But there's no tolerance. It's a one-way street. You have to believe what they believe, as off the wall as it is, and you have to allow them access to your children. You have to let them hurt the children in order to coexist. Because they're crazy. They're insane. They don't give a shit about you or your family or future generations. All that matters is their ideology. Yeah, and so you're required to sacrifice your children on the altar of their whatever it is that they claim they're entitled to. So you have to have surgery, sex change operations on your children who aren't even fully developed yet. And you have to listen to their fantasies. And if they decide they want to be a giraffe, I guess you have to let them be a giraffe. Or if they want to be the other gender, a little bit of role play, which all children go through. If they do a little bit of that, then we decide, oh, that's what you are. We're going to make you that. Since you said you like pink, you're going to be a girl. We don't care how you were born. We don't care that you're prepubescent and you haven't been around long enough to even explore the world, much less make a decision. If you asked me, there would be no sex change operations until age 25. That's a nice age. None until then. So you want to be the other gender, or you feel compelled to be the other gender? Fine. There was a time in which it was done in a very a respectful way, I will put it, in a controlled way, in a way to avoid false positives, false negatives. In other words, to avoid making the mistake and making it permanent. And we had a psychologist named John Money, finally learned his first name. Eddie Money, the performer, kept getting in the way of my memory on that. Same first name I have, John, so I had a block about it. This was a psychologist who espoused the concept. He championed the idea that boys and girls are the same. They're equal. Only the plumbing is different. It all comes down to how you rear them. You can raise a girl to be a boy and a boy to be a girl. No problem. And he did a couple of grand experiments on that with 2 sets of twin boys, one of which was mutilated in a circumcised procedure that went awry, cut his penis off. And the other one was in another surgery procedure, and that went haywire as well, and he was 8 years old. And in steps John Money, Dr. Money, and he says, oh, I'm here to save the day. We'll just raise one as a girl and one as a boy. That's all. You've heard of how helpful gender affirming treatments are? Gender reaffirming treatments? I don't know if it's affirming or reaffirming. You tell me. You've heard about Those are wonderful things, how healthy they are, because they help avoid suicides. Bullshit. Both of Eddie Money's subjects, the male raised as a female, committed suicide. One was about 20 years of age, the other one was about 22 years of age. 100% suicide rate. And so here you are, you're being told, oh, they're going to suicide if you don't do it. You're being coerced into going in the wrong direction. You're being forced into the wrong direction. They're not being honest with you. They're crazy. They're not honest with themselves. They hate themselves. They can't stand themselves. They can't accept themselves. Now, I'm not saying that the world is perfectly organized and we all come out perfectly male or perfectly female. I know there's some variations and I know there's some suffering going on. But it certainly isn't at the rates they claim. It's like that jackass, asshole out of Indiana, Albert Kinsley, who was funded by no less than Hugh Hefner. And he had a university standing, and it was during the war. When men were away, he conducted his research. His research was bullshit. It was flawed, and he published it. And he made us all look like a bunch of perverts. And while we might have had a rate of 4% experimentation of same-sex sex, he claimed that 10% of us were homosexual. 10% of the United States Congress was homosexual. Now that I look at it, I realize it's probably higher than that. You see, they have a way of advancing perverts, especially getting them elected to office or appointed to judgeships. You know, whenever they do a background investigation on these guys, it was the guys that really were blackmailable that got the appointments. The FBI made sure of that. In creating their secret police state, they made sure to have control over these people by making sure they only gave clearances to those that were blackmailable. How do I know that? There was a woman who was an investigator for the FBI who did the background. Check the backgrounds on these men that were being appointed to these positions of authority. And to her amazement, she was very bright woman. She lives in Oregon. Her family, I think she was first generation here. Family came from, I prefer to call them Persians. You want to call them Iranians or Iranians, fine. I prefer to think of that great nation Persia and the culture from which she probably really came from. Not this recent creation that the British gave us by splitting up Iran and Iraq so they could control that area. That's what the British do. They cause trouble wherever they go. They divide strong people so they can keep them conquered. They did that over everywhere they went. And we inherited some of that over here. We did that to the Hopi. We put them in the middle of their enemies, the Navajo. Horrible thing to do. They don't get along. They can't coexist. Their traditions are so different that they're always going to hate each other. Okay. I think I've gotten off track far enough. I don't know if I can get myself back on the rails. Yes, Dr. Kent went off the rails again today for the entire world to see and made a spectacle of himself. Folks, I'm trying to explain something that I don't rightfully understand. Something happened when we were a young nation. Ben Franklin signed the Treaty of Paris with a representative of the King of England, who also represented the Pope. And somehow we ended up being captured. Our flag was captured. Somebody else patented it. Our post office. Well, we know it was the King of England that had to authorize it because he was in charge of commerce in the world, and we weren't going to be able to do any commerce unless we submitted by giving him his post office in Washington, D.C. I wonder when Washington, D.C. became excluded as a part of the American Union. Thought it was the Organic Act of 1871, but now I realize it's different than what I thought. I hope there's some youngster out there that grabs hold of my videos. Some young, intelligent man or woman, or maybe a group, and they mine these videos for information and they go much further with it. That they do the research and they understand the technicalities under which we've been defrauded and cheated. I hope that we can motivate our people so we can roll back government just like they roll back prices in Walmart. Let's roll back government. Let's reduce it. Let's cut it down to size so we can be a free people. You're not going to be a free people with a big monstrosity like this hanging from your necks. This giant albatross we've been forced to endure. Kick the bastards out. If they're not going to be Americans, kick them out. If they're going to be Israel firsters, support that little postage stamp of an illegal nation founded upon terrorism in the Middle East, theft and terrorism, kick them out of the country. They shouldn't have a place here. How are they going to support our independence, our freedom, our liberty, when they're busy enslaving people in the Mideast and around the rest of the world? You know, I've been back and forth. It's the Roman Catholics. It's the Jews. My Lord, there's a group of people that hide behind both of those. Among those, a small, tiny group that have been running this show for quite a while. And they hold their people together with their weird secret ceremonies and their worship of Satan, their weird rites. They go all the way back to passing their children through the fire. That's how it's written in the Bible. It turns out they didn't just pass them through the fire. They fed them to the fire. They burned them alive. They killed them. In case you're wondering, it was typically a baby girl. And when they put that infant inside the fire of this idol that they had built, this giant half-calf kind of image of a giant, they screamed in ecstasy and joy. Do you know why they screamed? So they wouldn't have to hear the screams of that baby as it was being burned alive. You don't believe me? Then go and Google July 3rd, 1933, Soldiers Field. You will see what they claim is merely a reenactment, a dedication of the people of the land of Canaan to their god Molech, also known as Baal. That's what they dedicated North America to with that ceremony, which went over so well, was so well attended, people loved it so much that they did it again on Thursday after they had done it Monday. Tens of thousands of people participated. Between those two ceremonies, it was well over 200,000 people participated in those. So if you want to see what it used to be like, a couple thousand, no, more than 3,000 years ago, look at that and realize that the reason Yahshua said, kill them all, is because of practices like that. You see, you're going to say, oh my God, the Old Testament God was mean. I remember as a little boy, that was what was going around in Sunday school. The Old Testament God was mean. Are you kidding me? That was the best thing that could happen to those people, was that they were eradicated from the face of the earth. Feeding babies to the fire, blood sacrifices, cannibalism, weird sexual practices, temple prostitution. Even with the men, temple prostitutes. And what do we have going on here today? We condone the same stuff today. That's supposed to be with it, I guess. It's supposed to be the happening thing. It's supposed to be the thing to do. Come on, folks. You don't believe that, do you? I think the thing to do is become as honest as you can be and forthright in your agreements between one another so that you both win when you have a contract. And sadly, we have predatory classes. They're called professionals. And the professionals have been turned against the laity in this country for a long time. That includes my profession of psychology. That includes the profession of law. Includes the profession of medical practices. It's all been turned against the people for a long time. As observed by that wonderful, honest Abe. I'm going to end on that note. He wasn't such a good president. We can do better than that. Provided we get rid of the son of a bitches that control whoever runs for office, who controls who's ever in the Congress and requires them upon taking their seat to sign a loyalty to Israel. A bunch of Israel firsters. That should be a dirty word. It's not Israel that's in that nation. Those are not the descendants of Israel the man. Those are the descendants of Cain. Read your Bibles. Learn about Cain. Okay, folks, I'm going to call it at that. We've gone just over an hour. You have been listening to Giving Psychology Away.